Hello, this is WWE Hall of Famer Mick Foley, and if you want to catch up on the latest in amateur and Olympic wrestling, there's only one podcast to listen to. Subscribe to Baschamania, the Baschamania podcast, and have a nice day. Yeah!
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. This is episode 81 of the Baschamania podcast, and today, Iowa's Michael Kemerer joins me on the podcast. If you haven't subscribed to the podcast, be sure to subscribe wherever you listen. Apple, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, Overcast, wherever you listen to podcasts, be sure to subscribe to Baschamania. And if you enjoy this episode, be sure to leave a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts.
It's Baschamania! Let me tell you something, brother. He gave us everything he had in him tonight. What you gonna do when Baschamania runs wild on you? Oh, it's gonna be a good one. And business just picked up here on the podcast. Oh, yeah.
All right, Michael Kemerer, how are you, man?
Good to be here.
It's exciting talking to you. The more I dive into your story, as we were talking about, it's pretty incredible how ingrained in the sport you are and have been from such a young age. And as I told you earlier, I'm a guy who I kind of became a wrestling fan late. I wrestled all through middle school, all through high school, was never any good. And I kind of walked away from it. I started watching NCAAs, started having guys like Cael Sanderson becoming my clients. And I started getting more and more into it. And now I think I'm like a cult fan. But watching all the college and senior level guys right now, for me, it's a process of going back and learning more. And when I dive into somebody's story like yours, I'm like, wait a minute, he went to Franklin Regional with Spencer Lee and Nico and this guy and that guy and Josh Shields. And it's fascinating. I'm curious for you, how did your career start at such an early age, or how did it evolve so quick to be around such an elite group of guys? And even though all these guys weren't elite back then, you guys all turned out, a lot of you, to be such a high caliber group of guys.
Yeah. I mean, starting off, you go way back to the beginning. When I was maybe 5 years old, you had me and Josh Maruka and Josh Shields, the two guys that went to Arizona State. And starting off with them, we had Nico Megaludis. He was a couple years older. And then his dad, Dan, was a huge part of our kids program. And so I think he really got our parents pretty into it. Our dads they're pretty crazy. They're pretty into it. So
Shocker, wrestling dads.
Yeah, right. So it was good. We practiced together. We went to tournaments together. We traveled to camps together and really built a strong kids program there. And then from there, growing up in that area, there were a lot of clubs, and there were just all the tough guys in the region that you see now that are still wrestling in college and after college and all that. And it was such a tough region for wrestling that, we were all practicing together, and then we'd go to these tournaments on the weekend and we'd, beat each other up, and then we'd go back and practice with each other more. So it was just a great environment, I think, to grow up in and wrestle in, and it helped us get a lot better pretty quickly.
For sure. And you evolved quick. I mean, you were runner-up 3 years in a row in high school before you won a state championship, which we'll talk about in a second here. But your talent level jumped levels early on. What do you think it was that helped you to get better and better early on?
Yeah, I think a lot of it was, first off, like I said, that having the crazy dads helped, but also those rooms and a lot of the tough kids that were in there and in the club wrestling and all that. But there were just a lot of kids in these practices every day. And, I didn't know a whole lot of wrestling maybe, but I knew that I was competitive and I wanted to win every live go or whatever. So we were just scrapping and wrestling with each other. And we had these really tough rooms, and it toughened us up a lot. And from there, it kind of starts to expand out, and we start wrestling guys from other areas and having a lot of success. And, it just kind of shows that you're getting a lot better, and you're testing yourself against those other guys then. And it just kept building and building. And by the time we got to high school, we had, a really tough region of kids out of southwestern Pennsylvania.
Yeah, I'd say. Did you know that a lot of those guys were going to be who they are now? Whether it's Josh Shields, Spencer Lee, wrestling with guys like Nolf and Chenzo at the Young Guns, and Nico at Franklin Regional. They obviously didn't have the NCAA championships and accolades they have now. But did you know you were a part of something special in that group of guys back then?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you're in the middle of it, it's kind of hard to really realize the extent of it. I think I knew that we had a lot of good kids and we were tough, but just didn't really put it together like, oh, these guys are going to be, going on to have all these high credentials and everything. It was just, we had a lot of really tough guys. And
do you watch The Office?
Oh, yeah.
So asking that question, your response really reminded me of Andy in the season finale or series finale when he was like, I wish there was a way to know when you're in the good old days.
Oh, yeah.
That's what that makes me sound like. But, you obviously had a degree to some degree, or you had some knowledge because you were getting better and jumping into high school. You were runner-up 3 years in a row, which – on one hand, for a guy like me, dude, I'd love to place the state tournament. Like, I couldn't even make it to sectionals in New York, let alone the state tournament. So to be runner-up, it's like, man, that's such an awesome accomplishment. But to a guy like yourself who's so competitive and has had the career you've had, I can imagine that it wasn't the feeling you wanted when you were there. What was it like to handle that defeat of getting to the end of the season, having so much success, but for 3 years in a row, not finishing the way you wanted to?
Yeah, I mean, it was tough because, when you're a little kid, that's kind of the thing, like state champion. I mean,
yeah.
You want to be a state champion. So, coming up short, not once, not twice, 3 times in the same match, it's tough. It was tough for sure. But at the same time, just dealing with it was kind of like, hey, the stuff that I'm doing is working. It's good. I trust in my coaches. I trust in my teammates. I think I'm doing the right things. I got to make a couple adjustments maybe, but we're on the right track. And that's a big thing that was like, hey, let's not throw out the whole playbook. Let's just make some adjustments here. And so it was that combined with just reminding myself that, I still love the sport. I still love to go in and wrestle. And, you come up short and it's terrible, but at the same time, it's like, hey, I can still wrestle. I can still go in tomorrow and get better. I can still, it's not over. I can keep wrestling, right? So that kind of thing just really helped me to just keep moving forward and keep getting better and just enjoying that whole process.
Do you think you did anything different after your freshman, sophomore, junior year? Different that obviously your senior year, you were undefeated, finally won that state championship. First of all, how good did it feel to finally accomplish that? And do you think you did anything different, to bring value to anybody who's young and listening? Let's say they're in a rut. Let's say they're finishing second. And I think there's a lot to be said of finishing second, and not that you're in a rut, but breaking through to that next level. Very few people get to that level of being a state champion in anything, right? So it's not that they're necessarily doing anything wrong, but you have to elevate your craft. What do you think you did to finally, and by the way, there's a lot to be said to even get back to the finals your sophomore year, your junior year. What do you think it was that helped you push through to finally win the championship your senior year? And is there advice you'd give anybody who, if they're trying to push through that next level, what they could potentially do?
Yeah, I mean, kind of like what I was saying with not throwing out the whole playbook. I made little adjustments. Little things. Okay, these are a couple positions where I really need to get better. Okay, what mental gains can I make? I know what it's like wrestling out there. So how can I prepare myself next time? Stuff like that. And then also, I just kept it super loose that year, and I had a lot of teammates and coaches that they kept it loose anyway, so it helped a lot. But I just kept it loose and found joy in the sport. And I was like, hey, I'm gonna go out there every time, and I'm not gonna waste a second. I'm gonna wrestle the whole time, and that's what you can control, right? You can control one day at a time. So that's what I would say. Control the little things one day at a time, and then when it's time to go out there and compete, that's the fun part. I mean, don't worry about breaking through or outside pundits or anything. It's just going out and enjoying it and wrestling hard.
And I'm curious too, as I always say I'm a Penn State guy, but I'm really a fan of greatness. And I think, having loyalty to a college team, you get kind of crazy as a college fan. And I think sometimes the fans get crazier than the athletes. Like, Penn State, Iowa, such a rivalry. Penn State, Ohio State, such a rivalry. And then it's like, I had Chenzo on the podcast and Pletcher's at his house grilling, and I got Chenzo hooked up with Traeger. He gets a Traeger sent to him. Pletcher's over smoking me on his Traeger. And I'm like, man, the fans go crazier than, sometimes the wrestlers. And I'm curious because you're a Pennsylvania boy who went to Iowa, and you've had you've had matches with at different levels. I know you suffered the heartbreaker to Chenzo your junior year in the state finals. I know you've wrestled Nolf and Hall in big matches in NCAAs. What is your relationship like with these guys? Josh Shields, do you maintain these relationships even though you guys are on some level in such a rivalry?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, maybe it's not like when you're texting every day when you live close to each other, but yeah, definitely. I mean, it's funny, like you come back for break maybe during season and you'll see these guys at a practice or I remember Jody will always have like a Christmas Day practice. You'll see a bunch of guys come back from college for the holidays and wrestle with those guys. And yeah, I mean, Chenzo and Pleasure, that's funny because I've known those guys since we were little.
Right.
And Ulf and all those guys. I mean, it's just like I said, we grew up with a really tough group of kids, and you're always going to have that connection. So it's really cool. I think there was some time at nationals and they were showing, and it was like all Western PA kids on every mat. So it was something crazy.
That's awesome.
Like every mat West, and it was like, like that's gotta be really cool for our parents watching us out there, seeing, not only me, but all the kids that it's looking at a practice room from 10 years ago. You know what I mean? So it's interesting. It's good.
Yeah, and it's so funny too because now with social media and I know with the quarantine and people trying to train differently, and you see like guys like Roman Bravo Young going down to training with Sebastian Rivera. You see guys that maybe wouldn't typically train with each other, or maybe on the mat they're rival schools or they're rival something. And it's so cool to kind of take a step back and say, if the wrestlers aren't in that heat of a rivalry, why are you getting so worked up? And I'm as guilty as anybody. Like when Penn State Iowa's on, like I'm in the Penn State corner and it's like, I don't, But it's also, and it's one of the blessings of this podcast is being able to get to know wrestlers from different schools and not kind of branching out. I've been fortunate enough to work with some of the best guys and girls in this sport, and it's so cool to see what transcends a school or what transcends a state. And I think it's a good reminder when you talk about Pennsylvania and Iowa. It's pretty cool. Speaking of Pennsylvania, Iowa, everybody knows where you ended up. You ended up at Iowa. And in prep for this conversation, I went back and I was reading an article Cody Goodwin put out back in January about how you looked up to Iowa as a kid. Tom Brands recruits you. And then you go there, something looks off, and you say, I don't know if I want to do this. Then Brands, in a Brands move, drives 700 miles to salvage this. I'm curious at first what led you to Iowa, especially being from Pennsylvania and, kind of being in that time where Penn State was starting to come up and you had that option of kind of staying home. I believe I remember correctly, Lehigh was a big option for you. What led you to Iowa, and what was it that almost caused you not to go there, and how was he able to salvage that?
Yeah. So going back, I mean, big Iowa fan from middle school on. That was kind of the place for me. I kind of just always was like, that's where I want to go. But then you get into the recruiting process, and there's a lot of schools talking to you, selling you on their school, and they all have good things to say. So I was like, all right, I want to weigh out my options. I want to make sure I do this right. So I get narrowed down to a couple schools, and it's time to take my official visit out to Iowa. So going out to Iowa, and I really like the coaches and the campus and everything. But with me, I've just always been a big person on like doing everything right to be the best you can be. And big thing with that was the partying scene, and things like that. And maybe I was a little naive as a high school kid. I don't know, but I went, and I didn't really have a good experience with it. I was kind of like, I feel like there's kind of a lot of this going on, and just not really what I was expecting at the highest level program. I was like, how committed are you really? That's kind of just that was my thinking. So after the visit, I went home and was kind of talking to some people I was close to, and I was just like, I did like it, but there was that thing there. It just didn't feel like a fit. It just didn't feel comfortable for that reason. And so then word gets back to Tom.
I love that word just gets back there. Just imagine Pennsylvania to Iowa.
Yeah. It gets, that somehow travels back to him, and so he instantly was like, owning it. And he's like, we made a mistake. So he gets in the car. He drives straight to my house. He gets there probably around dinner time. That's probably a solid 10-hour drive if you
700 miles. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a drive. You're on I-80 for a long time there. And so he gets there, and he comes inside, and he's just like, hey, like, what concerns do you have? First he addressed all the, the things he heard that I didn't like. And he's like, what else? What other concerns do you have? And kind of talked it through with him for maybe 30-40 minutes. And then he's like, okay, like, what else? Is there anything else? And I was like, I think that's it. I think he hit it. He's like, all right, sounds good. And he just stands up to start leaving. And my mom is kind of like, oh, like, let us at least make you dinner. You just had a long drive. And he's like, nope, I got to get back. He's like, but I had to answer those questions. I had to talk to you. And I'm like, now it doesn't really surprise me at all. But at the time I was like, wow, Tom Brandon just drove to my house.
Yeah.
Just to say that and then go back. So, it meant a lot to me. And then, I had been pretty close. I think I was kind of telling people like, I really like Lehigh. And after that, I kind of had to rethink. And, 2 or 3 days later, whatever, I committed to Iowa, and that was it. But it's a good story because it probably saved the recruiting.
Yeah. And was there a time where, even when Brands was telling you all this, like, let's say partying and drugs and alcohol is a concern of yours, and Brand says, don't worry about that, it's not happening, whatever he said, was there a time where it took you a little bit to see that, like, okay, I'll kind of give him a shot? Or was it just total belief? Yes, that's it, I'm a believer.
Yeah. I mean, I think really the big thing that he said that really stuck with me is he was like, he was like, first off, like, we're not into those things. I mean, it's not like we're condoning that. We don't do that stuff. Our coaching staff. And then the other thing is, he was like, we're recruiting people like you. And Caleb Young had actually committed a couple weeks before. He's like, we're recruiting people like you guys because we're trying to get people that are like you, not people that are doing that stuff. And then it kind of opens your eyes to, okay, maybe we can be the start of a change here, and we can, we got a good culture coming in. And I just, hearing him say that, it really was like, I like that.
I got to be honest, my ego would be through the roof if that happened to me. Because, like, I'm a humble guy, and I look to God constantly, like, give me wisdom for this. Give me discernment. Give me conviction. Give me this. Give me that. But it's got to be for somebody like you who was looking up to Iowa as a kid, and now you have the coach of Iowa, the program you looked up to, saying, we want you. We want your caliber of character. It's not just, hey, you're a 4-time state champion. We need you to fill a hole at 157. Like, no, he wanted you. I can't imagine. Like, I feel like my pride and ego would have been through the roof.
Yeah, it definitely persuaded me a lot. It was just hearing him say that, and just how down to earth, one-on-one, he's saying that to me. It's like, it really resonated with me.
I can imagine. And I watched an interview where Spencer had said that you and Caleb Young really changed the atmosphere over there, which, I think says a lot when arguably the best guy on the team says, hey, he came through and paved the way, and if it wasn't for him, I might not even come here. What does that mean to you, and how do you think you were able to accomplish being a part of changing an atmosphere of such a storied program? I just had Zahid on here, and he was telling me about going to Arizona State, where he wanted to come in and kind of create something. It's not that you necessarily intended to come in and create something. Iowa was already that was the dream. But yet you managed to come in and still kind of change the atmosphere. What was that like to be able to do that when you kind of started, even if you didn't know initially you were doing it, to start hearing that from the guys? What was that like, and how do you think you were able to do that?
Yeah, I mean, when I hear Spencer and people say stuff like that, it means a lot because I feel like the culture has come a long way and it's really good. And I think a lot of it is just just the principles and the things that were instilled in me growing up, the coaches that I've had and the places that I've been. It's helped me a lot and kind of made me learn to be a certain way on the mat, off the mat, and then you throw in a lot of other guys, Caleb Young and Alex Marinelli, what he comes from. And, there were a lot of guys in my recruiting class. We had a really big recruiting class, and we weren't a top ranked recruiting class, but we had a lot of guys come in. My roommate for 4 years, Paul Glenn. I mean, we just had a lot of really hard workers that, were really about doing things the right way. And I think we got a lot of people on board with getting the job done the right way. And then before you know it, you get a couple of those good classes in there, and you have a good culture. So it really has been good. It's been great.
For sure. And, talking about the way you were raised, you have Galatians 1:10, your Twitter bio, which talks about not trying to win the approval of your peers and seeking to please and serve the Lord. And I'm curious how much impact your faith has had on both your career and also turning you into that leader you've become within the Hawkeye program.
Yeah, I mean, it's been huge because it's easy to make wrestling your God, or you can make these things your God, but they're worldly things, they're earthly things, right? And I think to me, it's relieving, that this isn't, if I go out there and don't perform my best in a wrestling match, that's not gonna make me lose him, and that's something where when you work at something your whole life, you can make it out to be that in your head if you don't have that grounding. And so I think having that grounding and then it helps you to be a better leader, be a better teammate. Just those principles I think are huge. And I try to spread them every day. And I think we have a lot of guys that they have a strong faith and they try to do the same.
Yeah, and it shows. And, it's no surprise when you talk about different guys of a high caliber telling you that you've impacted the culture and the atmosphere. And when you look at something bigger than yourself, which, I tweeted out last night, like everybody's going nuts over the debates. And I'm like, guys, don't lose sight. Like, keep your eyes on God. Don't look at man. You're going to be depressed real quick. And I think the same applies to wrestling. If you just look at the wins, if you just look at the losses, both are going to destroy you because you're only going to win for so much. And you see, I'm sure, these parents that live in their past, and it's hard to watch. And it's like knowing that there's something bigger, there's something better. I think, and I'm sure for you, it's helped keep a proper perspective, whether it's through those runner-up losses, whether it's through some of these highs and lows, to have that kind of stable ground, I'm sure has helped you a ton.
Oh yeah, it's helped a ton. I mean, I tell people, everyone's like, oh, what would you have done if you'd have lost 4 state titles in a row?
Yeah.
Like, I'd be the exact same person that's sitting here today. I mean, it doesn't change who I am as a man. It's just a part of life, right?
For sure. And so you make it to Iowa, and from a competitive standpoint, you have an impressive freshman and sophomore season. I think you finished 3rd and 4th in NCAAs. And, that's obviously not what you want. I'm sure everybody wants to become a 4-time NCAA champion and has high expectations of yourself, especially when you go to a program like Iowa. What do you think you took away from those first 2 seasons?
Yeah, I mean, it's like I was saying before, to a lot of people that's like, oh, that's good, you're a young guy and all that. But, I think a big thing is just got to be the same wrestler every single time out in that college season, especially when you're young. Maybe it gets long, or you have your ups and downs and different things like that, or you can let your weight get out of control some weeks, and some weeks it's good. I think the biggest thing is just you got to be the same guy You got to be steady right here. You got to be steady every day and keep getting better and wrestle everybody the same, and knowing that you belong there right away. And I think, a lot of these young guys are coming up in college and they're wrestling like they belong, and that's the way it should be. And I think that's probably just at the top level, something that if I could go back, it'd be like, hey, wrestle every match the same and be mature, keep your weight under control, that stuff. It's just maturity that comes, I think.
Yeah. And the next year, after you have these 2 impressive years with top 4 finishes, you suffer a knee injury, you're out for the season. How tough was that adversity, and what was your mentality to persevere through, where you have a couple of really good seasons and it's kind of like high school, like you're right there, you have what it takes to break through. What was that adversity like, and how do you think you overcame that and stayed on that path? If I don't want to get too distracted and I don't want to get too hung up on the negatives of the situation.
Right. Yeah. I mean, first off, just with the injuries happening, it's tough because, we're wrestlers, we're warriors, and we want to wrestle through everything. We want to push through, and you're like, yeah, my knees hurt, but, I can still go. And so making that initial decision, with the coaches and the doctors and everything, that's one thing. But, and then once I decided to do that, it's like the coaches were telling me, they're like, you get your surgery tomorrow and you're better than you were yesterday. You're on the road to recovery, your knee's healing up. And so then from there, it was just looking at it one day at a time, gave myself a lot of little goals, did reading, just what I could do. I tried to coach my teammates, try to watch, put myself in matches, just really doing what I could to get myself the best edge while I was off, and find ways that you can get better, that maybe when you're in the middle of the season, it's, that route's not available to you. So you do it whenever you can't wrestle. Just being creative with it. And I felt like I did end up learning a lot that year.
Yeah, obviously in the next year, which was this past year, 2020, you only lost one time. You split matches with Mark Hall. You won at the duel. He won at Big Tens. First of all, what do you think it was during that time off that helped you to be able to beat a guy like Mark Hall and only have one loss to a guy you beat? Like, that's, again, you talk about elevating your craft and getting to that next level. You kind of did that. Whereas I feel like sometimes when guys have injuries, it's hard to bounce back to get to that same point, let alone go to the next level. What do you think it was that helped you go to that next level a little bit?
Yeah, I think it made me hungry, and I think it made me have just an even greater appreciation for the sport, where maybe before, maybe there's a time where you look at it as a job. I don't know, maybe a little bit, but
sure.
And then you get it taken away from you for a year. And then last year, it's like every single time I was on the wrestling mat, every time I competed, I was just, the first thing is I was so thankful to be there. I was thankful to have that opportunity. And then it was like, all right, let's have fun. Let's get better. And just kept that steady attitude of enjoying it every day, looking for ways to get better every day. And, you do that every day consistently, and that stuff starts to add up. And combine that maybe with a little more maturity. I moved into a new weight. So maybe not having to lose as much weight. I don't know what exactly the exact thing is, but you combine all those things, and then, you put it together and you start to feel pretty good.
Yeah, and after splitting those matches with Mark Hall, next up would have likely been a rubber match in NCAAs. What was that rivalry back and forth like, and what was your feeling heading into NCAAs?
Yeah, it was a fun rivalry. Like I said, after missing that year, it's like I just want to go out there and wrestle the best guys. And he's obviously a very well-known guy, extremely high-credentialed guy. So going out there and getting to have those battles with him was something that I really looked forward to. I was looking forward to nationals, to wrestling him. But, every year, there's upsets at the nationals. My freshman year, I got pinned in the quarterfinals by Palacio, so that was definitely one thing going through my mind. It's hey, I'm super excited to wrestle, the rubber match here, but let's not forget I got a couple other guys that have a target on my back. So I had that perspective. I'm gonna have to take it one match at a time. It's not gonna be easy, but I was looking forward to wrestling him again. we've had some high scoring, action packed matches, and
Yeah.
I think that's the most fun stuff to wrestle in.
What was your reaction when you found out that it was canceled?
I mean, it was a bummer. I think everyone was pretty bummed that I was with. We were in practice, and Mariah, our director of ops, came out with the news, and we could kind of feel it coming when I saw that the March Madness was getting canceled and the NBA, they stopped the games. Kind of feel something unique was happening, but it stunk. But I kind of just tried not to dwell on it. I mean, I feel like it'd have been tougher maybe if I was a senior. I felt for a lot of the seniors.
Yeah.
Pat Lugo was a senior. He was ranked number 1. He's number 1 seed. I really felt for him. And Spencer Lee, trying to be a 4-timer. I felt for those guys. So kind of feeling for those guys, and makes me not feel as bad for myself, I guess. But ultimately, I think the attitude was just, hey, let's move forward. We don't know the extent of this virus, what's going on. We don't have a lot of details now. So let's respect what's going on, and just when we get our opportunity, we'll get our opportunity.
Yeah, and the other big storyline for NCAA's was the team title, right? I mean, Iowa was in like a 10-year drought. It looked like on paper this was your guys' year. Like this was it. Was it frustrating to have that taken away from you? And how did you kind of, I don't want to say let go of it, because I've talked to a lot of you guys and I've learned it's not something you can kind of completely let go of, but you have to kind of push it aside and move on. What was that like?
Yeah, I mean, it's unique because you feel like you're at your peak. You're looking around the room and everyone's getting ready, getting what they need. We're all ready to go, and you think, God willing, we're gonna have some really good celebration coming up here if we take care of business. So it's hard to describe. It's kind of like it doesn't feel real at first. It just felt like this stuff doesn't actually happen. But pretty, like I said, we kind of just had to move on. We actually we went down to Miami with Lugo's family. We went down there and just got away. We didn't really know what was going on, so we were like, hey, let's get out of town and give ourselves a break. And that was good, just to be together as a team. And we had like 13 guys there or something, so just doing something to kind of take our mind off of it. But yeah, we felt like we were in a really good position there. You still got to wrestle the matches, but it's a unique situation.
Totally. And it's been a while since you wrestled, but thankfully it was announced this week you're wrestling November 1st at the Hawkeye Wrestling Club Showdown Open against Tommy Gantt. What's your thought heading into that match, where this is your first match since Big Tens, right? I mean, you don't normally go this long without wrestling.
Yeah. Oh, it's exciting. I mean, I love competing. So having something to compete in, for a while there, it looked like we didn't really know what the next thing was going to be. Now, having a date in front of me, getting to wrestle, right in our backyard here, tough opponent. I mean, you can't ask for much more. Like I said, you like wrestling the best guys. He's a well-known guy. He's been on the circuit for a while. So I'm really excited to wrestle. I'm really excited for some of these other matches too. I think they're still coming out with some of the matches, but there's a lot of fun ones. And, I'm glad that this stuff's happening, because no wrestling for a while there was kind of
it's a bummer. It sucks, especially as a fan. And is this your first time wrestling freestyle in like 4 years?
I haven't competed freestyle since after my redshirt year. Yeah, I wrestled in universities. So
that was 2016. Somebody tweeted me like, when was the last time Kemerer wrestled freestyle? I'm like,
yeah, it's been a while.
2016. Do you think this will kind of get the momentum going? Like, do you want to go to the Olympic trials? Do you think this is going to be like a kickstart for freestyle again?
Yeah, I'm excited to wrestle freestyle again. I mean, hoping that, we get a good college season here. So maybe after this, I'll be wrestle on a folk style. That's what I'm hoping.
Yeah.
We get a good season here, but it feels good to wrestle freestyle. I mean, freestyle, folk style, I like wrestling both. Haven't wrestled much Greco, but I wrestling's wrestling. I mean, it's fun to go out there and let it fly, and that's kind of how I look at it. You got to make a couple adjustments here, but for the most part, go out and let it fly.
Where do you think you are right now? If you know where your conditioning level was, you know where your confidence level was back, let's say March, like 3rd, I think Big Tens was. Where do you think you are right now compared to there?
I always feel ready to go. I feel ready to go. I feel like I could go out and wrestle the nationals tomorrow if I had to. So
that's so wild to me. Like, there's so much training and peaking and conditioning, and so many times I ask them, like, where do you feel right now? I'm ready to go. Wrestling. That's so wild to me.
Yep, ready to go.
That's wild. Something non-wrestling I want to talk about for a minute. I know you're a business major at Iowa, and I'm curious what your plans are for the business side of, if you have plans, like non-wrestling plans for the business side of what you want to do. Obviously, I've owned a marketing company for 12 plus years. I've got equity in a couple companies. So I love business, and I'm just curious what your plans are, what your perspective is on that.
Yeah, I like it. So I'm in my master's right now it's an MFin, Master's in Finance at Iowa. I got my undergrad in finance. So I think the investing side of stuff's pretty cool. So right now, I'm so wrestling driven, and I have these goals for after college too. So I've kind of, I don't want to say I've put all my eggs in one basket, but for me, it's just wrestling right now. But I do enjoy the stuff I'm learning. I enjoy the business world, the finance world, all that stuff. So I think that's something that, once I'm done with this, that might be something I want to do. I'm not sure, but I like following what's going on in the business world, the finance world, investing
world,
all
fun.
that stuff.
It's
really interesting. Yeah, it's really interesting to me.
And that's why I saw, like, so many wrestlers, you see their, like, degrees. It's like, I can't even say the word, kinesiology, whatever it is, like study the body. Like, that's like, whether you're watching a duel or what these guys are going for, it's like majoring in kinesiology or whatever it is. And I'm like, a business major. I like that. That's refreshing.
Yeah, I like it a lot.
Awesome, man. Well, listen, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the podcast today. Best of luck in your return to the mat, November 1st. I will be watching, and I will be rooting for you. And that is it for today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. If you did enjoy this episode of the podcast, be sure to leave a 5-star rating review on Apple Podcasts, and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on more episodes. For more wrestling content, be sure to follow Baschamania on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and follow me. I'm at JBash on Instagram and at JustinJBash on Twitter. I'll be back with another episode shortly. See ya.
And the beat goes on.